Ford Motor Company. I'm honored to be here with you all today at this first annual Afro Future Summit. It is an honor and it is an exciting time for us, especially as we talk about the future. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about our future, and more specifically as it pertains to racial equity. Envision the destination. That's the first thing that we must do. I introduced myself, right, as the racial equity director. So my work is focused more around identifying and dismantling processes, procedures and practices, even behaviors, right, that systemically create a gap between career advancement and fulfillment of individuals of the same abilities, but different skin color. The future that I envision does not have me in it. The future that I envision does not need this job. So I want to talk a little bit about how we get to a point where we journey to racial equity. And what does that look like? It starts with us listening, and we listen with our eyes. We see with our ears. The journey to racial equity is listening. When we look at the dictionary, it tells us listening gives attention to a sound, right? We give our attention to a sound. We take notice of and we act on what someone says. We make an effort to hear. We lean in. We're alert and ready to hear. Well, we're going to take a small journey on how we actually got here today. And I'm going to start with asking you to listen with your eyes and see with your ears. March 13th, 2020. Do you hear that date? What do you think about when you hear that date? I remember I see myself packing my laptop, my mouse, and my desk charger to take home for what I thought was going to be a few days. It soon became evident to me that over the next few days that lockdown started getting issued across the company, across the globe, that business would never return to normal. Fast forward a couple of weeks, April 13th, I started recognizing and seeing COVID ravage my city, taking 8 loved ones, acquaintances, and friends within a 2-week period. I began to lose sight of what normal was because I would never return to normal. A couple of weeks later, May 15th, I accepted wholeheartedly that we would never return to normal. So I'm looking at this map right now. You guys are looking at the map on the screen, and we say, what does the journey look like? We all might be remembering how we watched the dots pop up across this map, how those dots got bigger. Why are we looking at 2 maps? Well, it's because one was the depiction of COVID-19, the pandemic that we were in, and the other, well, that was social protest jumping across the globe. We saw social protest expand across all of the globe. COVID-19 and a racial pandemic was a dual pandemic that we were taking notice of at the same time. 2 man-made pandemics, both affecting our lives every day. The pandemic created the opportunity for the world to pause and listen. We watched as our skies, we listened to Mother Nature as our skies cleared in China, the Himalayas revealed in India, the waters clearing in Venice. We watched the protest erupt across the globe. I actually saw my neighbors for the first time. Why? Because the busyness of everyday life had slowed down. We were all at the same level playing field. After 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the world listened with our eyes. We listened, standing in solidarity with George Floyd. We listened, no justice, no peace. We listened, businesses are closing. The current pandemic put a spotlight on the fact that Black people have always lived in a racial pandemic. Thus, these inequities that have been displayed in terms of healthcare, Black people dying of coronavirus at an alarming rate that is about 2.5 to 3 times higher than any other group. We see housing in the terms of the federal eviction ban disproportionately affecting and hurting Black and Latino tenants. Employment where essential workers, predominantly Black and Latino, on the front lines every single day. We saw our education and the disparities in underserved communities where we all went to remote learning, but many of us didn't have access to internet or even computers and laptops at home. Of course, the policing and justice system has racial pandemic inequities, too many to name, but even entrepreneurship, where of the 2.6 million Black-owned businesses, Ron Busby said only 2.5 million have no employees because these businesses are closing. When I look internally at the work that Ford Motor Company is doing, we're trying to make sure that our employees, that we recognize that our employees are not a monolith. We understand that they are impacted by each and every one of the things in the pandemics that we're faced in today. And so the perpetuation of racial inequities have a lasting economic impact on our families, on our communities, in our corporations, and on our people. So we have a huge responsibility right now as corporations to actually make some progress, hence my role. Many corporations made public statements about where they stand, letting their constituencies know, I stand with you in solidarity. But now we need to move toward action. That action has to go beyond philanthropy. Absolutely, Ford is committed and dedicated to the communities that we serve. But we also need to make investments in our human capital. And Ford is making excellent progress in that space. That is the future that I look forward to. When we think about futuring, I'm reminded of an article or a book from, what's his name? Larry Lippitt. And he coined the term preferred futuring. And I think we're all in that space today. It's in a space where we envision the future that we want, and we unleash the energy to get there. Harvard Business Review noted last year that achieving racial equity in the workplace will be one of the most important issues that companies will tackle in the coming decades. And I add that it's also the most difficult one as well. So this is where listening and futuring intersect. We have the opportunity and the duty to practice what he termed preferred futuring, which he describes as a way to engage everyone in the system to be able to communicate with each other. We are all active participants of preferred futuring right now as attendees of this first annual Afro Futures Conference. The energy has been unleashed and we need to sustain it. At Ford, we try to reinforce the need to address these issues head on by modeling how we care for each other, both inside and outside of the company. We acknowledge that we must address these current challenges within the company first. And we have our North Star, which is we are family, we celebrate our differences, and we belong. Preferred futuring helps us engage in dialogue so that we can listen with our eyes and hear with our ears. And we have to realize, how did we get here? We start the dialogue and go back to the future and then figure out what happened to cause us to get here. Once we agree on those issues, then we need to move on. We had the dual spotlight on the pandemic. We can no longer be silent. We are now doing the work to identify our values and beliefs that frame and behaviors that framed where we got to where we are today. It is very important to do that work. Again, by listening with our eyes and seeing with our ears. And then we will be able to uncover those things that are on the horizon. Where do we want to be? At Ford Motor Company, we aspire to be the world's most trusted company. And to gain trust, you have to demonstrate integrity, be of service to others, and exercise competencies, both technical and cultural. You have to have dialogue, and dialogue causes us to listen. Progress is not made without intense efforts, both personal, both individual, and also at a community and global level. So we need to close the gap, one conversation, one person, one day at a time, and never stop. As I close, I envision a future where I can be 100% authentically myself without the fear of having my skin color used against me as a measuring stick, not only for my own success, but also for the success of others who look like me. Looking at mentorship as a way to share, not just to lift on a career basis, but also on a personal level. I envision a future where we no longer have to sacrifice our Blackness for perceived professionalism, a future where opportunities and access are fair and equitable. I'm reminded of a Pat Parker quote that a colleague of mine shared with me this month during Black History Month, where She said, the day that all the different parts of me can come along, we will have what I call a revolution. So as you listen with your eyes and you see with your ears through continued dialogue, be brave, re-educate yourself, understand your history, acknowledge that racism does exist, check your biases, amplify humanity, value diversity and inclusion so that we can create a culture of belonging and empower Black voices along the way. Thank you.